Let me introduce to you Mr. Gary Hindmarsh, who is a chartered engineer. He is a fellow of the Institute of Marine Engineers, and he is the principal of South East Marine College. He was the head of the Faculty of Marine Engineering and lecturer at South Tyneside College. He is the Honorary Secretary of the International Association of Maritime Institutions, which has 33 training and educational members from around the world. He is a board member of the UK Merchant Navy Training Board. Of course, he has got some many other important activities. Gary is going to talk about something very important to all of us. He's going to talk about the economics of maritime training. Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. You'll notice that I've actually put myself as not the principal of the college that employs me. I'm actually in my role here as secretary of an organisation called IAMI. And if I can press that, I'll just give you a quick thing. We're actually a group of all the colleges in the UK, the Maritime Regulator, and quite a number of overseas colleges around the world, including, we're delighted to say, the Jordan Academy for Maritime Studies. So we cover quite a broad spread of different maritime providers. So I thought I'd talk to you in that context rather than giving you an indication of what happens in the northeast of England. What do? Well, we actually help the regulator make the rules. We actually get involved in writing some of the new regulations which came through IMO, some of the model courses. So we're actually involved in helping you get your business. So what do we know about economics? We must surely just be trainers, are we? Well, maritime education is an industry. It is an employer, quite a large employer, in fact much bigger than most shipping companies. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to look at quite a number of the providers of manning around the world, and I've picked the largest 5 countries in the world for supplying officers and the 5 largest countries in the EU for supplying officers, and you can see I've listed them there. So if there's a range of different countries, does that mean that they all train to different standards? Well, you'll each probably have heard by now, the IMO have a standard STC as amended in 2010, or Manila, but in reality all flag states interpret that book in their own way. Does that mean that they all interpret it a different way? Probably yes, I would guess so. 2 years ago, our organisation asked 8 different European providers to talk about how they implemented STC 2010, and there was 8 different versions, completely different versions, and including there was a separate version from another organisation called EMSA. Now, why do they do that? Well, basically, everybody thinks what they have is right. Everybody thinks the car that they drive is the best car in the world, and they don't want to change it just because somebody's come along with a new rule. And in reality, that's what they did. So they just looked at STC 2010, thought, that's what I've got, it works for me. Most follow a similar pattern, but there are some quite striking differences. Holland did, for instance, that for years have allowed simulator training to count as sea service when every other country stopped it. And to be honest, I sigh a little bit with the Dutch on that one. So if IMO haven't got the same standard, surely everybody has similar educational standards. We all get trained to different things, whether diploma, whether it's degree, but there's no oversight of that neither. You'll find that different countries have tried to do that, and in Europe we came up with a wonderful invention called the Bologna Agreement, named after the oldest university in Europe. And it meant that each organisation had to grade what the educational level that they have. Well, that sounded good. It's like the IMO. It sounds good on paper. In practice, it's slightly different. For instance, even in our country, so I'm from England, we have our grading system. 80 miles north of me is Scotland. They have a different grading system. I thought we were all in the same European thing, but never mind. So let's look at the maritime sector, back to these countries which I selected earlier. And as you can see, it's above here, you can see that everybody has very similar levels of training from the duration. And this includes the sea service element. So it's when they start the training to when they finish as graduated officers. And the only different one in there is the Philippines, which start their maritime education age 16, not 18 as most would do. The Philippines is changing. In 2 years' time they'll also be 18. So maybe they are more similar than we think. So what's that got to do with economics? Well, we know that each country have different support for different levels, and this comes not really from how they support maritime training. I'm not sure that governments are really there to assist the maritime industry. I'd be grateful if governments didn't get in the way of the maritime industry, but I'm not sure where their assistance comes from. So in the educational sector, we don't look at any special favours from government, nor really do we receive it. So these are those countries again. As you can see, these are the fees the different students are paid. So in the Philippines, most of the education is through private providers, and their cost for the full duration is $4,000. In China, you can go through state education through an employer, but that's quite restricted. Most of them charge more than the private providers. In China now, there's a lot of private providers in China, they're $8,000. In Russia, through the Ukraine, $13,500. In Turkey, the state picks up most of the bills, so the students pay very little. In India, quite a lot of them are private providers. In Norway, the state pays everything. But what you don't realise, the price of food and living in Norway is drastically expensive. In Poland, the state pays quite a bit, but the students pay quite a significant amount. And right at the bottom, I didn't put us down there because it's the highest. I simply put it down there because that's the true figure, of which in England or in the UK, the employer pays. So state aid is there in different guises, and in some cases it does help. So why would a sponsor, why would a student pay to be educated? What benefits does it give them? Well, this was some UK research done some years ago, and it indicated what you expected, that the higher qualification you got, you actually got more money. So we can relate with that one. So quite clearly at the bottom there, if you have a qualification up to management level or level 5, which is one of the sub-degree ones, you're expecting to get about 20% more wages than somebody who did not. That actually seems quite low, does it not? I think a lot of people expect that as you get these higher qualifications, you will be very rich. The reality is slightly different. So what about the companies? We can break up the companies into quite a number of different guises. And I was going to give a little test here, but because I can't help it, I'm from education, but I won't. I'll resist because I've only got 10 minutes. So which business model do you follow? Does your company follow one with high wages and one where you have a big internal market where you can promote somebody? Or does yours company perceive that training's quite expensive? They think they worry about a retention issue and it's okay, they'll put an advert in the paper and they'll poach somebody else's people. The only one worry is if you're in the latter. If you're poaching somebody else, what's to stop them poaching your staff? Nothing. So we can cut up the employees in slightly different cut. One is cutting edge. Oh, that sounds good. They're the top layer of people. They're the people who make the new policies. Most employers are actually in one where they want to stay ahead of the rest. Nobody likes to be thought of as following. So they like the idea that they're staying ahead. You can be, I like this one, a thoughtful employer, which means that you think about it more than doing it. Well, something like that. And the final one is a prudent person who really just sits waiting for somebody else to do all the work. So, as I talk to the employers about why they should sponsor students or why they should commit to training students, we have to look at some of the benefits. And this actually information came out of a German and Swiss study. They said that as the employers get more involved with training, they actually have a better contribution from people who are actually in the middle of their training. So the students which you saw earlier, those in the third year, have actually got some knowledge. They actually contribute to the business quite significantly. Also, once they're trained and introduced into your company, you have a much lower risk of them integrating with current officers on board. Your staff retention rates, if you do measure that, will be much higher. And also, you'll be able to retain and expand your business. They're things that every business wants to do. So, Sorry, this one's not as large. I thought there was going to be some notes, but it will not surprise you that trade is expected to rise. Clearly, the people who write these things are telling you the trade's going to rise because they're in the business of telling people that. But one thing that every commentator tells us is that we're actually short of seafarers. And you think, well, that can't be right. We heard earlier today that we had too many. Now, whether that's 20,000 or 30,000 is the numbers which are being pushed around the world, what are the indicators that we have not enough staff? Are your wage levels increasing? Do you find it longer to fill vacancies once they become available? Do you find that people on board your ships are staying longer than they should? Do you find more people leaving than joining? And do you find that your staff is getting older? I don't mean getting older, I meant the actual average age of the staff is going higher. Now actually, if I looked at that for my own business, I'd be saying, yeah, that's what's happening. I have a staff shortage. I'm not sure you have or not, but if you're putting your wages up, I'm sorry, you've got a lack of supply. So maybe it's because we're paying people too much. That's always a benefit. So again, these are just rates that I sorted out as I was putting the presentation together, and these are for a first officer at sea, in dollars. So you can see that the wage ranges aren't as extreme as possibly you may have thought. These are actual wages. These are actually nominated wages. If you want really good wages, bizarrely, go into the yachting industry. At the moment, they're the biggest payers. But I shouldn't be telling you that, because then your company will also have a staff shortage. So maybe cheap labour is no longer out there. One of the other worries that companies have is how long people stay at sea. Now, in the 1960s, the UK Chamber commissioned some work to ask people how long they were at sea, and at that time the average duration of people staying at sea was 12 years. And this one here is from 2010. This is some, again, British data on how long people stay at sea. There's quite a significant percentage, 10% stay longer than 30 years, so you've got service out of them. We heard earlier from a gentleman representing the Maersk company, and their internal measure is 8 years. They have somebody retained with them for 8 years. They believe that they've got a return on their investment. We mentioned also about profiles of age. We all get older, that's a positive thing. We can see here we have two graphs. The dark blue one is non-UK and the light blue one is UK officers. This is data from the UK because they issue quite a lot of non-UK certification. And you can see that there is a big shortage in the age people between 36 and 50. At that age relates to the 80s when not many people were trained in Europe. And you can see the blip, the higher blip of people aged 55 to 60. There is a concern with that blip in the UK because as part of STC 2010 we introduced something called refresher training. It meant that all the old masters and all the chief engineers had to climb in and out of boats, put fires out at age 60. And I can assure you, if from the offshore industry, that usually puts a lot of people off. So if you don't think you might have a staff shortage, it's coming your way. The good thing is there is quite a lot of people who are going through training. There is still a good industry to attract people in. You've seen plenty of young officers today. They're attracted into the industry. So I'll conclude to get you back
the last
time.
page.
At last page. Maritime training. Our business is your business. Maritime training exists because you exist. You exist because we can supply you. We're one of your supply chain. If I asked you how long it took you to buy a ship, to get the finance in place, to go to the shipbuilder, get him to build it, put it on and actually sail it, you'd probably be under 3 years. And in some cases, you might be under 2. Some of them, if it's stock ship, 1. It takes 4 years to train somebody. So if you're training now, you're not going to get that person for 4, possibly 5 years. My commitment is it's actually going to take you longer to get the staff as part of that resource than it will to get the steelwork. The other thing here is we find that education is becoming much more business focused. You'll find that most educators, most providers will know the numbers, they'll know the key performance indicators of their business. Our clients, whether it be the student or whether it be the shipping companies, expect much more. But they also expect more with lower costs, exactly the same as your clients. So all we can say is we're in this together. We're here to supply you with people, and hopefully you're there to receive them. Thank you.
Thank you.